Hey guys, welcome back to Oak Abode. As you guys already know, we have been building gardens on our new 20 acres, which we are also building a house on, which means that we need to find a way to get water to those plants since they are all newly planted. Since there is no well, obviously that remote, there's no city or municipal water either. So we've been dabbling a little bit in rainwater collection to get water to those plants out at our new property. It has been a major learning experience for us, and a lot of research has gone into the kind of system we're using and really how we're building it. So today I wanted to share with you some of the pros and some of the cons of harvesting rainwater. These are kind of my main takeaways as far as what I wish I had known before we started harvesting rainwater, but if you have anything to add, please leave a comment below. I have about 10 pros or good things about harvesting rainwater and about 6 cons that I believe everybody should consider and have been a major consideration for us as well. Rainwater collection pro number 1 is that rainwater may be really beneficial for your plant's health. Rainwater tends to be more acidic in at least our area than the well water. So our soil is very, very alkaline. It tends to have a very high pH, and most of the plants that we grow in our garden do okay in that alkaline soil, but they really do prefer something that is just a little bit lower. So when we get rain, the rainwater is actually more acidic. So first thing to consider, what I consider a pro in our area, is that the rainwater tends to be more acidic than the water we get out of the ground. Because the rainwater is more acidic, it helps neutralize that pH a little bit more than the well water does. This is really important, especially if you're growing blueberries or trying to grow them like I am, because I'm growing them in containers. If I were to keep watering them with just that alkaline water from the ground, even though I amended it in the beginning, there's a good chance that over time that well water would make that soil too alkaline. So having rainwater that is a little more acidic, if you have alkaline soil like we do, is actually a huge plus. Kind of on that note, rainwater does typically have fewer contaminants than well water as well. So again, I'm kind of comparing this to well water. You might be on city or municipal water, in which case they're probably treating the water, which means they're probably also adding some things to it which you may or may not like, especially when it comes to your plants and your food. So rainwater is generally considered, I guess it depends on where you live, for the most part considered the cleanest water source that we have access to. So it is important to consider, if you're collecting rainwater, what is on the surface of whatever you're using to collect it. So if you live in like an agricultural area like we do, and if they're spraying with pesticides, the pesticides might get on the roof of your collection system, which means then the rainwater would have it as well. So I'm not saying rainwater is always safe or preferable to drink for human consumption, but in terms of what you're watering your plants with, it tends to have fewer contaminants than the water that is coming from the ground. On that same note, rainwater is softer than well water, largely, almost across the board. And when I say softer, I mean that rainwater doesn't have as many dissolved minerals. So at this rental property we're currently at, there is no water softener. Even at our last property, we had a water softener, but the calcium was so bad that it was just a constant struggle to try and keep up with it. If you're considering rainwater collection to water your garden like we are, this is a major consideration, because if you use drip irrigation like we are starting to do, what can happen is those little tiny holes in the drip irrigation line can pretty quickly become blocked with calcium and other dissolved minerals that are from the groundwater if you're using well water. So of course this means that some of your plants aren't going to be getting enough water. You probably almost certainly won't find out until it's too late. So that is a big problem if you're using drip irrigation, and even in general. We really like harvesting rainwater because the water is soft, doesn't have all those dissolved minerals that are coming from the groundwater or the well water. So kind of to sum up those last few points in one big point, again, rainwater is largely considered some of the cleanest water on the planet. I know that some cities and some environments, some parts of the world, you have more of like an acid rain problem, and you might want to look more into like the air pollution, and maybe it isn't the best idea for you or for your plants in terms of like a main watering solution. I'm just talking about, at least in our area and the vicinity around us, rainwater is generally considered the cleanest source of water. Now, because we're using a hard surface to collect it, it doesn't mean it's always 100% safe to drink. So we absolutely love our Berkey water filter. We've been using it for at least 3 years now. So if you are one of the people who doesn't yet have a Berkey water filter, especially if you're interested in self-sufficiency, highly recommend that investment. Our Berkey water filter is amazing. Takes out so many yucky things that are both in city water, municipal water, well water, and rainwater. So we absolutely love it, and we will never stop using it. Another pro to harvesting rainwater is that rainwater collection is often a more affordable source of water compared to well water, depending on where you live. And I want to add, don't feel like you have to live somewhere with a lot of rainfall in order to use rainwater collection. You can find tons of videos on YouTube of people living in this straight up desert who do fantastic on rainwater collection. You just need enough surface area and enough storage to get by. Wells can be difficult to price because when you're drilling a well, number one, you don't know how deep you're gonna have to go until you start going. It's kind of like this big gamble. We still have to drill at our new property, and we live in a great area for water, but always there's a chance. I'm kind of crossing my fingers it just doesn't get super crazy. So you don't know how far you're gonna have to drill for a well, and even if you already have a well, you don't know how long it's gonna last. So everybody, oftentimes in communities, everybody's tapping into the same aquifer, and really you don't know how long that is going to last, especially as places become more and more populated. In our area, we don't really have a problem with wells running dry, but I know in other areas, like we have a lot of family in Idaho, they are constantly having to drill new wells, and it is hugely expensive because the populations are growing and there's not enough water underground to sustain all the wells that are going in. So even if you had a well drilled a few years ago, if other people are tapping into that same water source, you might be out of luck very soon. So that's another huge reason to love rainwater collection, is because you're not necessarily sharing it with other people. For the most part, I'll go more into that in a second. Okay, I do have 3 more pros for you. So another pro to rainwater collection is that you don't necessarily need electricity to make the system work. To have a fully functioning system, especially if it's like a whole house system, you're probably gonna want electricity, yes. But right now we have rainwater collection out on a remote property where there is no electric currently, and probably in the space that we're collecting rainwater right now, there won't be electric. So the good news is that if you don't have electricity, you don't need electricity to collect the rainwater and to make it work. If you want the system automated, you're gonna want electricity. So because we want an automatic drip irrigation system eventually, we are looking into kind of solar panels and solar batteries and playing with that a little bit. We definitely want to make sure it's working and kind of in a good rhythm before we give you guys a full tour or a full how-to. But the good news is that for remote properties, if there's no electricity, you can still get by just fine. The main thing is to have a surface area for collecting the rainwater and some sort of storage for storing the rainwater. After that, there really is a lot that you can do just with gravity to get by. Pro number 8 about rainwater harvesting is that it allows for more self-sufficiency than well water or obviously municipal or city water. We are not self-sufficiency experts by any means, but every day we are trying to become more self-reliant, more self-sufficient. And one of the ways that we're doing that is by getting more proficient in rainwater harvesting and rainwater collection. A lot of people think that if they have a well, that means that they're self-sufficient. But what happens when the power goes out? Most times people with well water need a well pump to bring it up from the ground. You may have like a hand crank pump, which is better than nothing. But a lot of people don't have that, and a lot of people don't really think that far ahead, because even if the power goes out just temporarily, it's usually not enough for people to notice that they need more water pumped up too. So long story short, if you learn how to harvest your own rainwater, learn various techniques for that, you can be a lot more self-sufficient than well water. And obviously if you're on municipal or city water, then you are just totally out of luck if the grid goes down. Finally, the final pro that I want to talk about for rainwater harvesting or rainwater collection is that it is totally scalable. So for example, when we go to drill our well, we're gonna have to drill all the way until we get enough water to supply the house, and that's that. It's not like we can drill a little mini well out like in our field for cheaper or like as a super budget option or something. Drilling a well is pretty expensive. Obviously having to replace a well is pretty expensive, but rainwater collection you can just do on the scale that you feel comfortable with. So right now we're just starting out with a little kind of rainwater collection station because there's currently nothing at that property in terms of buildings or roofs or surface area. So we're just building a little station around our berry patch where we hope to eventually have it all on a drip irrigation system. And it's just a nice little mini system that we can keep within budget and just do as much as we need to water the berries. If we were to want to do a whole house rainwater collection system, of course we would need to scale it up big time. So we would need massive tanks, we would need pumps, we would need a lot more surface area for sure. But you might already have a building that you can use as surface area for rainwater collection, or you may also just want to try something little like we're doing. You can even go smaller. You can have a mobile chicken coop or a stationary chicken coop that has rainwater collection on it and just collects enough water for your chickens. So personally, I think that's a huge pro to rainwater collection. It's scalable, and I guess on that note, kind of as a bonus, you can move it around. So if you have it on a movable system and you have like movable chickens or a chicken tractor, you can move their water with them instead of having to plan around a spigot that you have in the middle of your pasture. So those are the main benefits to rainwater collection that I have come across. Again, if you can think of other benefits, please leave a comment below. Right now, I want to get into some of the cons. And actually, while I was talking about the benefits or the pros, I thought of another con. So now I think I have 7 cons, so bear with me. So con number 1 is that in order to collect rainwater, you're gonna need surface area. So if you live in a really urban environment, you might be able to use your house, but if you're on like a little postage stamp like we were for a while, you're gonna need to plan accordingly. So some people might not have enough space to do a whole house rainwater collection system in terms of the house, but also the storage tanks that you need if you live in a dry environment. So I do consider that kind of a con, that the more rainwater you want to collect, the more surface area you're going to need. So not a problem for us on the 20 acres, but in the apartment that we first started out on, that would have been a little bit of an issue, although not a huge issue. I mean, as long as you have a roof and a barrel, you can at least start on a small scale. Con number 2 to consider about rainwater collection is that it may accumulate more debris than well water or city water. And it's not really a may, that's kind of like, you're gonna get more debris. It kind of depends on where you are though. So if you're collecting rainwater under a bunch of trees where there's a bunch of leaves, you're probably gonna have more of an issue with debris, or if you live somewhere really dusty where you're getting a lot of dust on your surface. On the 20 acres that we have kind of an agricultural land, there's pretty much no debris. The main thing that we have to be conscious of is, I think they spray with the pesticides and herbicides usually around 2 to 3 times a year. So when they're doing that, we want to be conscious about maybe just shutting down our rainwater collection for a little while, wiping down the surface area and starting over, because we don't want those contaminants on our plants. Again, it's just kind of situation specific. If you're collecting rainwater, you're just going to have to think about what is circulating in the air wherever you are, whether it be leaves, whether it be dust, air pollution, smog in general, pesticides, that kind of thing. So something to consider. Number 3 kind of piggybacks off of number 1, which is just that rainwater collection can take up more space than well water or city water. So obviously a well is really nice because it's just kind of a really tiny spot in your yard that you have to worry about. But if you're doing rainwater collection, you got to worry about the quality of your roof. If you have additional structures like we do, the space that it's taking up, obviously the space that the storage tanks are taking up. So I really don't want to discourage anybody who is on a smaller property. Don't let it shut you down, because you can make anything happen with whatever land you have. It just maybe takes a little bit more planning and consideration. Con number 4 is that rainwater harvesting is more weather dependent than obviously well water or city water. So it is going to fluctuate more. The amount of water that you have is going to fluctuate more depending on the weather. So granted, I think it's important people know that even well water and city water, those aquifers can dry up with really serious drought. So it's not that well water is 100% dependable, but obviously it doesn't fluctuate quite as much when it's all underground and there is kind of more storage, more reservoir underground. With rainwater harvesting, especially if you have a smaller system like we do, you're gonna be watching that forecast a lot more, which is maybe kind of a pro. A little bonus pro I'll throw in is that when you harvest rainwater, you get super excited about rain, like weirdly so. I joke with my husband that my new social media is just the weather forecast and the weather app. I'm always checking it and seeing if we're gonna get rain, because it's just so much fun to be able to harvest your own rainwater. But that being said, obviously it's a little bit more stressful if you're depending on it and you're going through a dry spell. So the more storage you have, the more surface area you have, the less you're gonna have to worry about those fluctuations. But obviously you do have to worry a little bit more on rainwater collection about fluctuations in the weather than you do with well water. Con number 5, really important one to consider, is that it might not be legal in your area. So make sure you look up what is legal in your area as far as rainwater harvesting. Wildly, in some areas it is just 100% illegal. In other areas it's just kind of regulated more. Make sure you look up what's legal in your area. Fortunately, our area has no regulations whatsoever, so we have a lot of fun experimenting with it. I have 2 more cons for you. Number 6, I think, is that it requires a little bit of ingenuity. If you are somebody like me, this is a major con, because I hate thinking through puzzles and I don't know, how to make a system, mechanicals, how to make a system work. That is so not my area of expertise. If you're more like my dad, you love that kind of thing, or my husband, husband, depending on his mood, may kind of like it. Probably does most of it begrudgingly because I ask him to. Yes, I'm sure you can hire professionals to figure out this kind of thing, but rainwater harvesting is not kind of the mainstream, at least where we are, and probably in most parts of the country. It's harder to find experts to just call up and be like, hey, can you set up a rainwater system for me and we'll be good to go? Kind of like it is with wells. We can call a well driller so easily and have them set it up and not have to worry about it. So it's kind of a con, I think. Consider that if you want to harvest rainwater, you're gonna have to think through kind of the puzzle side of things. Some people love that kind of thing. So maybe that's the pro for you. For me, that's a con. But fortunately, there's a lot of really helpful videos on YouTube. And once we are sure that our system is smoothly working the way that we want it to, so far so good, but I'm sure we'll encounter some kinks here or there. Once we get that sorted out, of course, we will tell you guys how we did it in our little rainwater station as well. And when I say we, I mean my husband. He's doing the whole thing. Finally, con number 7, the last one that I want to talk about, is that rainwater collection isn't going to work nearly as well in the winter. So if you live in an environment where it freezes, especially if you want like a whole house system, that's going to be probably kind of a problem. I won't say it's impossible. I'll bet you anything it's possible, but I'm sure that's one of the reasons why people don't use whole house rainwater collection where we live, because in the winter everything freezes and it's just not an option for us. But if you live somewhere where freezing is a lot less common, might be more of an option for you. Fortunately, we're not worried about our current system because it's for all plants that will just go dormant in the winter anyways. They're not going to need water. For us, it's just something that we do during the hotter months, warmer months, to make sure that our plants are getting the water they need during dry spells. So these are my biggest pros and cons about rainwater collection or rainwater harvesting. Again, please leave a comment below with your pros and your cons about rainwater collection. I would love to hear from people who have been doing it for years and who live in different environments from us, what kind of problems you encounter and how you solve those problems. Like I mentioned, we don't like to put how-tos out on the internet until we are 100% certain that it is exactly the way that we like to do it. So once we've been using this system for at least a few more weeks, we're gonna put out a video on how we built it. It's super simple. So if you haven't already, don't forget to hit subscribe so that you can stay posted for that in the future. Also, I post more frequent updates on our Instagram, which is oak_abode. If you don't wanna wait for the video, you can always join us there. I guess that pretty much sums it up. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.